Our growth compared to other countries has been steadier, and it started earlier than most, which has been very good for us. But on average, we're a pretty average country in terms of the level of growth. This is all corrected for inflation. This is all $2005 dollars. And you can see that incredible march of prosperity over the years. We have just had, of course, a pretty rocky couple of years. This only goes up to 2010, but you can see the dip there at the beginning of the crash. That's the kind of thing that happens from time to time. It happened most spectacularly in the 1930s here, where we had a Great Depression. Here's what happened in the Great Depression. Incomes fell back to where they had been about 25 years before. And people found it intolerable. They had to live the way their parents lived, and they found it intolerable. They had to live at a level which their great-grandparents would have thought unimaginable luxury, and they found it intolerable. That's how much we have internalized the idea that things are supposed to keep getting better. But that's a new idea. Nobody before the Industrial Revolution thought that. Today, we expect our cars and our entertainment systems and our computers to keep dazzling us with something new every year. We expect that, but that underlying expectation is new. Okay? In the 18th century, here's something you never saw in the 18th century. A politician asking, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? Nobody asked that because in the 18th century, nobody expected to be better off than they were 4 years ago. It's not just incomes. Let's look at what's happened to our leisure time. 100 years ago, the average work week in this country was 65 hours. Today, it's 33. 100 years ago, 6% of manufacturing workers took vacations. Today, it's virtually 100%. In 1910, 26% of 65-year-old men were retired. And that's at a time when most men didn't make it to 65. Of those who made it to 65, they were really old. 3/4 of them were still working. Today, 90% of 65-year-old men are retired. Child labor was common in 1910. Boys entered the workforce routinely in their early teens. Today in this country, it's practically unheard of. So we are working less per week, fewer hours per week now. We are working fewer hours per year, fewer weeks per year, fewer years per lifetime. The average housekeeper in 1910 spent 12 hours a day on laundry, cooking, sweeping, cleaning. Today, it's about 1.5 hours. Here is the typical housewife's laundry day in the year 1910. First, she pours water to the stove, heats it over coals, pours it into the big tubs there, washes the clothes in the tubs, wrings out each individual item separately, either by hand or with a mechanical wringer, and then moves on to the oppressive task of ironing using the heavy flat irons that are continuously heated over the hot stove. The entire process in the year 1900 takes 8.5 hours. She walks over a mile in the process. We know this because the United States government used to hire researchers to follow housewives around as they did their laundry and count every step. And we know from those old research studies that doing the laundry required 8.5 hours and a mile of walking. By 1940, our heroine has a washing machine, and now her laundry day is down to 2.5 hours, and she walks 665 feet. Today, nobody spends 2.5 hours on their laundry. You throw the laundry in, and if you have one of those really new fancy machines, it emails you to let you know when it's done. It's not just laundry, it's not just cooking and cleaning and sewing. In the year 1900, most houses in this country did not have central heat, did not have plumbing. So other routine household tasks included lugging 7 tons of coal and 9,000 gallons of water around the house every year. Just since 1965, the average American has gained 6 hours a week of leisure. That's the amount of time that we spend in the office or commuting is down by 6 hours a week for the average American. That's the equivalent of getting 7 extra vacation weeks per year. That's just over the last 40, 50 years or so. So we're getting richer, we're working less, and on top of that, the quality of the goods we buy is improving. If you doubt that, go pick up a 40-year-old Sears catalog, leaf through it, and ask yourself if there's anything in there you want to buy. Here's a couple pages from a 40-year-old Sears catalog. You can get this AM radio with separate tone control. It weighs 2 pounds 9 ounces. That's exactly twice as much as an iPad. One transistor, comes with the battery. You could get this black and white camera, which takes up to 8 pictures. And then you replace the film pack, which probably costs about as much as the camera does, so that you can take another 8. You buy the separate flash bulbs, and you screw the flash bulb into the camera every time you want to take a picture. And, of course, they come in packs of 12. And when you run out of those, you have to replace those. The only thing is that these pictures are a little misleading. They're misleading because you're seeing the 40-year-old prices on there, and we really ought to correct those for inflation. Those are what the prices are corrected for inflation. $128 for that transistor radio, $210 for that 8-picture camera. And I guarantee you it takes a picture far inferior to what you get off your iPhone. Or, it's not just electronics. Take a product like healthcare. Here's a shocking number. If you look at the quality of healthcare in the poorest parts of Africa today, and if you control for the effects of AIDS, and there's an argument for doing this and there's an argument for not doing it, but if you say that, well, AIDS is a special one-time thing that is not part of the general trend of healthcare, so I'm going to take the effects of that out, then the healthcare outcomes that we are seeing in the poorest parts of Africa today, measured by infant mortality, measured by life expectancy, measured by pretty much anything you want to measure, are almost exactly the same as what we were seeing in the United States of America in 1975. 1975 in the United States, you were getting the same quality of health care that the poorest Africans are getting today. And now I want to ask you, which would you rather pay? Would you rather pay 1975 prices for that 1975 health care, or would you rather pay today's prices for today's health care? I venture to guess that there is not an informed person in the world who would choose to go back to 1975, and that's got to tell you that for all the problems with our system and all the hype about rising costs, healthcare today is a better bargain than it has ever been. The moral of all that is that increases in measured income, even the phenomenal increases in measured income that we've seen for the last 200 years, grossly understate the story of how rapidly the world is getting better. Henry VIII had a much higher measured income than nearly anyone in this room, than certainly nearly anyone and probably than anyone in this room. He ruled half of England, but I bet you he would have traded half his wealth for modern plumbing, a lifetime supply of antibiotics, and access to the internet. Now, along with all of that wealth that we have generated has come another brand new phenomenon: wealth inequality. Per capita income in the United States is 70 times what it is in the poorest parts of Africa. The world has never seen inequality on that level before. That's brand new. You know where it came from? You know why that phenomenon is new? Because wealth is new. The reason we have all this inequality for the first time is that we have wealth for the first time. And if you think inequality is a problem, it's worth reflecting that it is at least a tremendously fabulous problem to have. It's the problem of how to divide up all this amazing wealth that nobody would have ever predicted we'd be able to generate in the first place. If you want to think about issues of inequality, and I'm not going to go into great depth with that today, but I do want to mention a couple things that you want to keep in mind when you think about inequality. First of all, nobody in the world today is poorer than they would have been before the Industrial Revolution. I know that because if you were poorer than you would have been before the Industrial Revolution, you would have starved to death by now. Another thing to keep in mind is that economic growth is new. It's only a couple hundred years old. We've been around for 100,000 years. We've had 200 years of growth. This process is just getting started. It's just getting started, and it has started some places later than others, and in some places it's gone by fits and starts more than it has in others. But we have not begun to see the power of what economic growth can do on a worldwide basis. And we should remember, too, that in the long run, a rising tide lifts all boats. Here, after all, is what economic growth has done for the poorest Americans. Let's look at households below the poverty level in America. 98% have refrigerators. 67% have washers and dryers. 96% have color TVs. 75% of those with over 300 channels. I grew up with 3 black and white channels. 68% have air conditioning. Many of the others live in climates where air conditioning is superfluous. 63% have internet access at home. This is households below the poverty level. When you survey people at that level and ask them, do you have enough food? 93% answer yes. Do you have any smoke or odors that bother you in your neighborhood? 93% say no. Any unmet medical needs? 86% say no. Any roof or ceiling leaks? 90% say no. It is more difficult to lead the life of a poor American than it is to lead the life of most people in this room. But it is